All right, folks, let's get started here. My name is Weston Lustig. I'm Director of Business Development at Walker Reid Strategies. Um, Appreciate everyone joining us today for an insightful webinar on maximizing energy efficiency in public facilities. We're going to discuss some strategies, some tax incentives, various funding mechanisms. So it should be a fantastic session. Um, I'm joined here today by our managing partner at Walker Reid, David Diaz, as well as our head PE, Brian Montenegro. Additionally, we are joined by Anissa Hemming, who's a director at the Center for Green Schools at USGBC. We are also joined by Tim Unruh, who's an executive director at NIESCO, as well as Charlie Zitnick, managing director at D.A. Davidson and Company. So each one of these folks will be providing some insight on a small piece of the kind of complete puzzle today. So let's move forward into the agenda. So we'll get started with some intros, just who's going to be presenting today, diving a little bit into what they do. Um, we'll be starting then to move into the Center for Green Schools, which will be Anissa. She'll be providing kind of an overview of USGBC and the Center for Green Schools, kind of describing what they do and how they can be a resource for folks on this webinar. We'll then move to Tim from NIESCO to discuss some elements of performance contracting. We will then move to Brian, who is our PE here at Walker Reid Strategies, and he will be discussing some of the more technical elements around some of these efficiency projects. We will then move to financing with Charlie Zitnick from D.A. Davidson and some of the mechanisms available out there for folks. And then we'll kind of wrap up with David Diaz, who will discuss some of the tax incentives available out there for renewable and energy efficient projects. Um, just housekeeping items. If you do have questions throughout this webinar, please put them in the Q&A. We will then address those at the end of the webinar. So just go ahead and put those in there. We're going to answer in the order they come in. We'll try to at least have 10 to hopefully 15 or even 20 minutes allotted for the Q&A, as we want to give everyone an opportunity to get their questions answered, as that's a big part of what we're trying to do, is create a bit of a forum here today. So I'll move forward here into what are we really trying to achieve in a succinct kind of one or two sentences. We're really here to equip public sector decision makers with the knowledge they need to plan, finance, and execute energy efficiency projects through engaging leaders in a collaborative and educational forum. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let each of the presenters or panelists today introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what they do. We'll go ahead and start with David Diaz.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending the webinar. We're excited to have such a great panel. I'm David Diaz. I'm the managing partner here at Walker Reid Strategies. Soon to be, and some of you may know, soon to be Walker Blue. We're merging with Blue Energy Group. We're excited about that. So I specialize in our energy tax incentive practice and kind of oversee our energy engineering practice. My main objective, though, is primarily Section 179D and ITC fall under my direction here at the firm. So happy to be on here and help out and educate everybody on everything we got going on. Especially, there's some news on the new bill that was proposed this week. So we'll get into that as well. Brian.
Hey folks, my name is Brian Montenegro. I'm a principal engineer at Walker Reid Strategies, where I lead our energy services team for our clients across the country. I spent over a decade in the energy engineering space, helping our private and public organizations improve their energy use, optimize utility use, and really help them reach their sustainability goals.
Weston, you can change the slide.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anissa Hemming. I'm the director of the Center for Green Schools. We are housed at the U.S. Green Building Council. USGBC is best known as the developer of the LEED rating system. We're a nonprofit based in DC. I have a little bit of time in a couple minutes to tell you a little more about what the Center for Green Schools does, so I'll leave it to there. I'll pass it off to Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Unruh. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Energy Service Companies. We work with the energy service companies who implement a lot of the things that are using these tax credits and deductions to make projects work. My background is I was at Department of Energy for 12 years and spent some time working with them. I also have a history of working in the energy service company industry, so I'm very familiar with implementing and understanding how these projects get put together and made. Thanks.
And we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with Charlie, so we'll let him, once we can get him on, we'll let him introduce himself when it's his turn to talk. We're still trying to, I don't know what's going on with him, but with his settings, but they're not letting him on. So, all right, let's get moving.
Great. Okay. So before we get going, we each wanted to explain a little bit about the perspective we're bringing to the conversation and how our work relates to energy efficiency projects in public sector facilities. So the perspective that I'm bringing today is from the school district lens. My team here at the Center for Green Schools has a mission to support and train the people who work in school districts, public school districts mainly, in the work that they're trying to do around sustainability and energy at their school districts. So we convene networks of around 700 or so school district staff in over 250 school districts who are trying to do this work. This is a picture of some of their lovely faces. Next slide. Everything we provide to school districts is provided for free, which means that all of our education is also free to anybody on the line today. So we post our education courses on USGBC's site under the Center for Green Schools. Any of them are accessible for free. And we have trainings related to how school districts should think about the way that they implement sustainability within their schools across the whole system. Next slide. And the reason that the specific lens matters is that the work that we do on sustainability and energy in school districts as public sector facilities is a little bit different than the work that we might do in some other public sector facilities because they have this mission around education. So anything that we, work with schools, school districts, to implement has to have an education lens to it. I mean, the purpose of the spaces that we are working within is to educate students. So the ideal situation is something like what you see on the screen here, which is, Discovery Elementary School nearby me and in Arlington has a great sort of whole system approach where the principal kind of understands that the school can be a teaching tool for her students and helps teachers understand how to use it and that sort of thing. And this is sort of like the ideal case when it comes to schools. Next slide. So we see, the Center for Green Schools collects examples. We do this a lot through LEED certified schools, but we try to keep an eye out for all kinds of examples that we can give to schools and school districts about how to make sustainability and sustainable choices very visible to students. So here's just a couple of examples of some schools that have been done. This one on the left is in Greensburg, Kansas, which many years ago, a lot of you will remember, was completely destroyed, and at least all their public facilities were destroyed by a giant tornado that went through town. And so they rebuilt their school to LEED Platinum and also have really visible signs of sort of a different approach to public facilities and energy and that sort of thing. So you see the wind turbine outside the window and the kids sort of engage with that. And on the right, you can see there's this very visible approach to stormwater control at this school in Ohio that really engages the students in that work. Next slide. So the other sort of situation with school districts is that the average age of a school in this country is over 50 years old, and we have some indication that school buildings are in really bad shape. There is data that was published in the State of Our Schools report in 2021 that indicates that we're falling behind annually by about $50 billion in investment in schools to keep them in good condition. And the USGAO reported that around a third of schools, to their knowledge, need updates to their HVAC equipment. So there's some real need for investment. There is some good news in that last year, 2024, was we saw the largest passage of bond funding for schools in recent history. It's about $15 billion more than last year, adjusted for inflation, than 2023. So we are seeing, schools invest more in their school buildings, communities invest more in their school buildings. It's still not getting us to the level that is needed, but it's a hopeful sign. All right, next slide. And the work that will be discussed today, there's the energy efficiency work. There's also the work that a lot of school districts are doing to implement geothermal systems and other things that are covered by the energy tax credits that are available right now. School districts have goals related to both their ongoing energy costs through efficiency, but also many school districts are starting to understand that they need to mitigate against the risk of rising prices and also the risk of volatility. And so one of the reasons they're choosing to do electrification work, for instance, is that the cost of natural gas is Charlie needs to be muted for whoever's on host duty. The volatility of natural gas prices is really problematic for schools. They need to be able to count on their operating budget and have a steady approach to that. So that's the other reason why these projects are becoming more attractive to school districts. Next slide. And this is my final slide. I'll talk a little bit more later when David is talking about the use of the energy tax credits in schools right now. One example of that is this example in Warren County in Kentucky. They have gotten a check for $1.7 million for their installation of a geothermal system. But this is part of a larger plan that they have been implementing over the course of decades with their capital improvement projects. And so it's woven into their energy goals over time. But it's exciting that they're being able to factor in the tax credits when it comes to the financial viability of technologies like geothermal. So I'll pass it off from here.
Thank you, Nisa. Tim, if you could jump on, I appreciate your help on getting Charlie on with me. We'll pass it over to Tim from NASCA.
Great. So Charlie, why don't you turn off your camera for now and we'll call you up later. It's great to have everyone here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction about what performance contracting is. It's something that the energy services companies do every day and are experts in this process. So next slide. So NASCO is a National Association of Energy Service Companies. We're a nonprofit association. We've been around since 1983. And what's significant about that is it means that performance contract has been around since at least 1983, but actually it's been around before that. So it's an established tradition of how we do projects for public buildings to renovate them and improve them and make them better places. We've got 172 organizations. We have an accreditation program that helps to maintain some policing in the industry to make sure that we have high quality services being done. We've got 22 accredited ESCOs, 14 energy service providers, and 4 accredited contractors. Next slide, please. What we do is we do a lot of advocacy and lobbying activity. Because performance contracting is a unique process that is not done by everyone, they don't have all the background and definitions understood by them. There's a lot of questions that come up. Those questions come up from state energy programs. Those questions come up from new entrants into the field. Legal sometimes will ask questions. Sometimes in the law there's changes, and so we work to try to make sure everyone understands how it works, how we move forward with it, and sometimes lobbying activity to help make sure the legislation matches what the industry needs to have for success. We do a lot of work with the accreditation program, interviewing clients and making sure that the projects are working as they should. We attend and participate in a lot of workshops and conferences, and our main purpose there is to continue to get the word out about the successful approach of performance contracting to improving our schools and our other public buildings. We do accredited webinars. If you go to our website, you can see a list of our webinars that we have. Anyone can attend those, and we offer continuing education credits for those. We publish RFP notifications, and we do a lot of coordination. Like, for example, Anissa's with USGBC. We work with them. We work with the Alliance to Save Energy. We work with the Association of Energy Engineers. NASIO, which is the National Association of State Energy Officials, is also one that we work with. Next slide. So what is this beast we call performance contracting? It's a process called an energy savings performance contract. It's allowed across the country through what we call enabling legislation. It means that in the federal government, there's legislation, and in each state, there's legislation that allows this process to occur. It does also mean that it's done differently at the federal level and in each state. And so when a company comes in and is working in a particular state, the process for that state or project is unique to that particular geographic area. What a performance contract is, it's a turnkey project development and fulfillment process. It means that you're entering into a contract before you know the scope, because you're going to have an energy service company come in and evaluate your facilities, determine what the scope is, come and discuss that with you, and then you make a decision about moving forward with a construction project. What's unique about the process is that the duration of the contract is 10 to 20 years, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, depending upon what the client prefers. And the idea is that the savings that you find in the project are guaranteed by the energy service company, and those savings are used over the life of the project to pay back an initial loan or amount of money used to fund the project. What is interesting about it is that it's a full turnkey process. In the selection process, the energy service companies often are selected based on qualifications and their reputation, and they work to maintain that reputation with you as they develop the project. It's a very integrated process. They work very closely with their clients, developing the projects, helping to understand what contractors they like, what types of equipment they like, what operational programs they like. So it's not a case where you're giving up full control of the project to this energy service company. It's really a cooperative effort to make the best project, because they're concerned about the long-term reputation. Since they have to be with this project for 10 to 20 years, they want to make sure that it is not a problematic project, but fulfills all the needs that you've established. The key point about these projects is you have guaranteed project performance, meaning that the project is guaranteed to make the costs to pay the note that you took out at the beginning of the project. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about this, but some things that are unique about working with an energy service companies. It's like working with a traditional design bid build, only the scope isn't developed by you, it's developed through the process of hiring an energy service company. The first stage is doing an ESCO selection process. Often an RFQ is done, sometimes an RFP, but most of the time an RFQ is done, meaning it's a qualifications type of selection. The scope isn't known, so you can't really go through a bid process since you don't know the scope. The selection should include an understanding of how the ESCO marks up subcontractors. That follows a DOE model from Department of Energy. Oral interviews, I believe, are a very important part of the step to ensure that you have proper understanding of who this team is that's going to be working in your facility for a long period of time. An investment grade audit follows that. An investment grade audit is unique in that it has a fixed price for implementing the project and a guaranteed savings for paying for the project. Those are very unique items that you won't find in other industries, only with the energy service company through a performance contract. And finally, performance management means that they'll be with the project for a long period of time, helping to make sure that it maintains the savings and produces results through the life of the project. Next slide. So who uses ESPCs? This is a chart done by Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. It's a little old. It's back in 2019. We are in the process of updating this information with a survey of our members. Probably will be out in 2026 is my guess. But the different market segments, if you look across the top is the federal government, and notice that the investment level is the left chart and the right chart is by project count. And what that means in the red at the top is that the federal government projects are large compared to other projects. In the middle is the green K through 12 schools. And you can see the projects are smaller in size. And that's because schools can be a very small subset, because schools may only have a few buildings to have work on. So the projects might be smaller than, say, an Army base or a military site. Next slide. So things that we install, it really is a broad spectrum, and I don't want to say that this chart represents everything that happens, but this is what came out of the studies from Lawrence Berkeley National Labs again back in 2018, 2019. But lighting retrofits at that time were a prominent installation. Energy management systems continue to be prominent as lighting systems are. Pretty much anything that affects the energy in your facility can be considered as part of a project. Sometimes there are water management issues that are installed. That can be water interior, that could be landscape watering. Possibly you need landscaping to conserve water, which is a cost savings. You might replace a boiler, you might replace that with a ground source heat pump, you might decide to put in solar. You might want to have a battery system. Maybe you're concerned about reliability. All of those types of things can fit into a project as they're an energy related type of things. And so when you talk to your energy service company, you want to be broad about what it is you think you might want to do and what your needs are so that they can understand how to customize the solution to fit your needs best. Next slide. So one of the things that we like to include about when we talk about performance contracting is this concept of leveraging. And I'm not going to talk all the numbers because that gets a lot involved. You can look at that later when you look at the slides and scratch your head and figure those out. But look at the circular charts on the left. The blue represents a performance contracting project. The yellow represents a project that maybe you had some capital money, you're going to do some portion inside your school building, maybe inside your public building, whatever it might be. Maybe you had money for a replacement of some components. Well, if you add those two together, you get the blue plus the yellow. But what's unique is if you put that all into a performance contract, including the C, the yellow portion, you get a bonus piece, the green. And the bonus piece comes from the savings generated from your capital spend can be then forwarded into the project and leverage that project to produce more savings and more project than you would have gotten before. What's very unique is that often the orange can be much larger than what's shown in this picture, meaning that the green would be much larger than what's shown in this picture. When we develop projects, often when you put together your savings mix of items to create your payback model, there's often a few things that just don't quite have the payback to get into the project. Well, the additional little bonus savings you get from that capital piece will come in and fund those deltas and all of a sudden make those fit into the project when they wouldn't before. And what we find is that almost always when we do projects in public buildings, we're always short of money. We never have enough to do everything we need to do. And by leveraging, we can take us just a little closer to making the project what it really needs to be to help us complete almost all the things that we want to have done. Next slide. I know you can't click the links here on a webinar, but I put this in here because it's important to note that the U.S. Department of Energy has a lot of tools and a lot of information out there about performance contracts. One I'll note in particular is owner's representatives, for example. If you're not sure how a project should work, or you're a bit lost, or maybe you don't have the staffing, there are owner's representatives. You can come out to naesco.org and look. We have owner's representatives as members of our organization. They come in and they come to your side and help you work through these problems and know how the ESCOs work and understand this industry. Department of Energy even has a training program on how they should work with clients and understand performance contracts. The Energy Services Coalition is another one. The Energy Services Coalition has a group that they have several types of training resources on their website. They're a group that works with energy service companies and state energy offices. And then finally, the National Association of State Energy Officials supports performance contracting as well and has information on their website. And the point of this is it's an established industry. It's been around for quite some time. And there's some very formal services that are around trying to make the industry understandable and workable to make it easier for you to work with this type of model. Next slide. I think that's all.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. That was great. Brian, if you can jump in and kind of now discuss kind of to Tim's effect, some of the, maybe the technical opportunities that may lie there. Tim mentioned a lot about, not knowing the scope at the beginning of the project. And I think that's, Walker Reid works pretty closely with the ESCOs in helping them develop those investment grade audits. So I'll let Brian jump in and talk about some of the opportunities from a technical perspective.
Sure, exactly. Thanks, David. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you today about the technical considerations for efficiency project in public facilities. We're going to break this down into 4 sections. We're going to talk about the equipment and system evaluations, discuss a little bit about retrofit versus redesign decisions, talk about implementation planning, and then at the end, talk about some high-level success factors for you to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So I think in a very general way, one of the biggest things that drives these types of projects is equipment and system evaluations. And even at a high level, you can get a feel for these things, assessing the current equipment and system performance, age, and reliability of your lighting system, HVAC systems, water fixtures, and building envelope. Those are the things we'll touch on today, but that's just, the beginning. There's obviously, depending on the type of building, more systems that could be brought into the fold, but generally speaking, you see these in all types of buildings. So when you're talking about lighting systems, you're looking at things like, first and foremost, what types of lights are you looking at? Are they LED? Are they fluorescent? For most, buildings, you're going to see your 2x2, 2x4 type troffers in the ceilings. Having an idea of how old those are and what kind of technology. You may still have incandescents. That could be a clue to knowing that you have an opportunity there if things haven't been transitioned to LED yet. Next one to look at in the HVAC side, it's really driven by how old equipment is. If you're having a lot of maintenance issues with certain equipment, and if you're having a lot of occupant complaints about certain equipment. So that's really those are the driving factors. Much like a car, the older it gets, the more issues it's going to have, right? So if you're having to spend a lot of time and money on maintenance, that can clue you in that maybe it's time to look at those systems and it may be time for an upgrade. In the water fixtures, here you're looking at your faucets, shower heads, urinals, toilets. Generally speaking, you're looking at how much water they're consuming. And obviously that's hard to measure, but you can kind of get a feel for when you flush a toilet, when you open a faucet, is it using up a ton of water, or is it, a lot of times if they're low flow fixtures, they'll have some sort of sticker or designation to them. And in the building envelope, a lot of times it's kind of hard to see because a lot of stuff's obviously behind drywall, but there are things that can catch your eye from a technical perspective. When you're looking at windows, you can kind of see if they're single pane, double pane, if you're holding your hand close to the window, especially during winter months or summer months, do you feel a lot of cold or heat radiating from that window? If the window opens, when the window's closed, is there air that you feel coming through? When you're looking at a door, if you see light coming through, that could mean that it's not very well sealed. Similar to a window, if you feel a draft coming through the creases, if it's a door with a window in it, same type of test. And a lot of times, depending on an attic space, you can see some of the insulation factors that are involved. If you see insulation that's either wet or tamped down, that really removes a lot of the insulating factors, and that's a big clue that you're losing a lot of energy through your building envelope there. Taking a look at if it's all well laid out and even, or if there's ebbs and flows through the insulation. There's more in certain spaces than others. a lot of these things that you can look at from a very high level to start cluing you in from an equipment and system standpoint if there's opportunity there. Obviously, the folks that come in and help you will take a look at this at a much deeper level, but you can still get a feel from a technical side on a high level. Next slide, please. Another thing to keep in mind is retrofit versus redesign decisions. So what's the difference? Really, if you think about it as an example, a retrofit would be if you have a 5-ton unit and you're looking to do a like for like change out. So the unit's old and it just needs to be replaced and be replaced with a similar unit, another 5-ton unit. That's your typical retrofit. When you're considering a redesign, it could be triggered by things like, is the space that unit's serving, has that space usage changed? Maybe instead of using a DX unit, you're now having to consider using a chilled water type system in your building. Maybe duct layouts need to be changed because the building usage went from an office to a more active space. Things like that are now going to be considered redesigns. And what you need to consider with these types of things are cost favors retrofits, but needs drive redesign. Generally speaking, when you're looking at just replacing a system like for like, that's going to be a very direct cost, kind of easy from a design perspective in terms of there's not much to consider there. Contractor is going to be well equipped to help with that and just the cost for doing that work versus with a redesign, typically it'll be driven by a need, and that's more revealed by understanding what your users need in the space, and if that space has undergone changes in the last few years, that those equipments may no longer be able to serve that space, and so redesign needs to be considered under those conditions. Many times engineering support is going to be needed when you're talking about a redesign rather than a retrofit, because with a redesign, you're going to have to typically pull permits, and a permit's going to require a drawing, which will require you to have engineering done to put together drawings for that. And it's not like you need to have a full understanding of exactly what scope of work is going to be retrofit versus redesign. But what it is important to know is to keep in mind that a well-written scope of work will put the onus and the responsibility on the contractors and the engineers, making sure that that's covered in their scope of work. If there is any permits to be pulled or designs to be drawn, that's covered by them, so that you're not having to then face change orders later on in the project. Making sure you have a basic understanding of this is definitely going to go a long way in these projects. Next slide, please. Implementation planning, also important from a technical perspective, a few things to keep in mind. So depending on the types of buildings, schedule comes into play, weather, building use. If you're looking at schools, for example, the obvious thing is to try to schedule projects for the summertime when kids aren't around. Depending on the location of these facilities, weather plays a big role on when projects can be done. And if the building, depending on the building use, if it's difficult to move people out of the way or empty out spaces for projects, that has considerations. And that's all stuff that needs to be discussed with contractors, so that gets taken into account in the pricing. And that kind of flows right into the next point when you're planning for phasing or swing spaces and occupied space precautions, because it really depends on what the building is. And unlike new construction, where each trade is kind of free to work on their thing without too much consideration of what's going on around them, with occupied spaces, depending on what the project is, what the scope of work is, you're going to need to consider either phasing projects along the way, or if there's large equipment that needs to be taken into consideration, how are you going to get things through doors, things along things of that nature. Again, all things that a good contractor will take into consideration, but even on a high level, having an understanding of that is pretty critical. And then the last point here is specific to certain types of buildings, with taking into account architectural significance in certain areas, because if your building is old and you have historical societies associated with it, there may be areas that you can't come in and renovate because of those considerations to preserve those architecturally significant pieces. So that will typically involve maybe a historical society and taking in the considerations for what they need to keep the building uh, up to the standard architecturally. It's also something that factors in if you're in that specific situation. Next slide, please. And last points I'll touch here is on success factors. So in my time on working these types of projects, these are a couple of the key things I found over the years. Stakeholder engagement early on is definitely something that's very beneficial. IT teams, legal teams, facilities folks, things of that nature, financing folks, bringing them on early in the project and getting their input and buy-in early on, or if they do have any concerns, having the time to address that in the beginning of a project rather than right at the end when you're right at a deadline. It definitely makes sure that these projects go through much more smoothly. Maintenance being top of mind is something that's pretty critical, and this could mean keeping in mind that the equipment that gets selected is equipment that now needs to be owned and maintained. So going with vendors that have a track record of equipment that it's easy to maintain and holds on for a long time is definitely key. And even design considerations such as HVAC equipment, access doors that are not up against a wall or a pillar. You'd be surprised how many times, a door to change a filter, it's only 2 inches away from a wall and you physically cannot get in there. Things like that, those are good questions to ask when doing reviews with engineering and design teams, to make sure that they are taking those types of things into consideration. And then the last thing I would say, just generally speaking, just be curious and stay involved. You hold a lot of institutional knowledge that a lot of contractors and engineers may not. And that can really play a big role. And I'll give you one example that I have found in my experience. In one project, we were putting in water pipes underground, and we were basically facing two routes. One route was along the street and another route was underneath a parking lot. The parking lot route was the easiest as far as not having to shut down the street or anything like that. And after developing and designing that route, we found that in one corner, we were running into an easement issue. So because we had kind of talked about two routes from the beginning, we ended up saying, okay, we're going to go through the road instead of the parking lot. And as we started developing that second option, the difficulties of having to shut down the road and all the transportation issues that was going to cause was really starting to make the project a little bit cumbersome. And the thought came on me at one point in time of like, why don't we just go underneath the parking lot and make a turn right before we hit that easement issue and go on the road, and that way we'll be on the road for a lot shorter period of time. And it really was as simple as this, because we were all stuck on this thought of these two different routes. Nobody kind of had that out of the box thinking that we can kind of do a hybrid option. And we went with that option, and it ended up working out because it just merged the best of going to the parking lot and not having to deal with so many transportation issues. And that really was a result of just staying curious, staying engaged, and you don't have to be a design professional to use common sense and finding partners, engineers, contractors that'll work with you and take your comments and thoughts into accounts when it comes to these projects. Because again, you hold a lot of that institutional knowledge is really key. That being said, I'll turn it over to Charlie here for a few minutes on the financing side, and thank you guys again for listening. If you ever need any of that technical help, we're here to help you here at Walker Reid.
All right. Thank you. As you have probably surmised, doing a project under a performance contract, it differs from traditional design bid build methodology, but it is a procurement tool, not a financing tool. And by that I mean the purpose is to get a project done with speed, without change orders, and probably most important, to have guaranteed savings at the end of the project, that the energy contractor is going to guarantee the savings that they've projected. And in addition, they are going to build the project at a guaranteed maximum. And it takes a lot of the unknown out of doing a project. And when we think about on the financing side on energy projects, you know, back years ago, it was quite simple. Whatever the engineering company and came up with as far as energy savings, we would use that money to pay the debt service on the money borrowed to make those improvements, and they would positive cash flow right out of the gate. As things have evolved and scope of work has evolved, you know, we've gone from at one time simply financing lighting retrofits and then having more savings than the cost of doing the retrofits and using that low-hanging fruit of lighting retrofits to pay for other improvements within a district or within a community. And as the industry has grown and changed, you know, we've gone from simply doing lighting retrofits to boilers and chillers, HVAC, doors, windows, building envelope, most anything you can think of can, with respect to improvements, including we've done solar, we've done geothermal, we've done wind, we've done battery storage. All of those are types of improvements that can be financed under an energy savings performance contract. And again, the beauty of it is that the cost of the project is guaranteed with no change orders, and the savings generated from the project are also guaranteed. And how we like to look at this from a finance side is kind of three buckets: the beginning stages, the engagement stage, and the closing / post-closing stage. In the beginning stage, it's a district or a community or a county has a need, and they reach out to find somebody that can address those needs. And you know, again, it might be lighting, it might be HVAC, who knows what the improvements would be, but they are calling a performance contractor in to come and help them identify the needs. And the performance contractor is then doing due diligence to be able to return to the city or the county or the district with their assessment of the need. Then the next part would be a finance and credit assessment. And that's where we come in, where we would begin the process of identifying, based on the savings, the scope of project they can undertake. And then finally, in that beginning stage, we have the selection, and Tim kind of went through that. It's oftentimes done through an RFQ process. There is a selection about who you as a municipality or a district want to be sitting at the table with. And I make the analogy, when you're sitting at a table with an ESCO, a performance contracting company, the table is round as opposed to a rectangle, meaning you are doing this collaboratively, not doing this from an adversarial point of view. Because keep in mind that the ESCO is giving you the knowledge that the cost will be the cost and there won't be change orders, and the savings will be the savings, and they're guaranteeing it. So that because you've removed those two factors on a project, that makes this a collaborative effort as opposed to an adversarial effort. That, nobody wants to have to call in anybody after the fact to make changes, and that's why you're collaborating on the front end. And then the next phase in this, after the selection of the ESCO, is the site inspection. And this is where they are drilling down and performing an investment grade audit of the improvements that are necessary. So in the beginning stages, you've got a very high level point of view of, boilers and chillers and other improvements that need to be made. But in the engagement phase is when you're getting engineers out and on site and going through all of your systems and doing an assessment of what can and what can't be done. And this is often when you want to bring in the other stakeholders into the discussion. And the number of influencers and stakeholders in a large retrofit or refitting project, it's, of course it's your on-site utility manager, director of utilities perhaps. It may be in a school district superintendent, or it might be a mayor/city administrator. It's always going to involve finance. So you need to bring in on that team, on that stakeholder team, you need to bring in the finance professionals and internal finance professionals, and again, collaborate and get buy-in from all of those groups that are going to have a seat at the table when the final decision is made. Once you've got the shareholder and stakeholder buy-in, then you go through the proof of the concept. And the concept is we want to reduce energy costs by X. And what the report from the IGA investment grade audit is going to demonstrate is that that's achievable, or it might demonstrate that's not achievable. The scope is too large, the improvements are too costly, and we need to scale back. And nothing has been finalized at that point. But that is the time when the as they say, the rubber meets the pavement, and you've decided on who your contractor is going to be, the scope of the project, and the cost of the project. And once you have those components, then you're ready to execute. And then that moves us to the funding and closing phase on the financing. The financiers have been at the table through all the discussions, providing advice and guidance. But now it is time to actually get the investors to invest in the improvements that the district or the community is making. And obviously you want that financing in place in escrow before the first spade of dirt is turned over. There is always a risk in any escrow project, in any project, if you undertake improvements before you have the financing locked up. So you want to have the financing in place, your contracts in place, and now you're ready to construct the improvements. And we're painting a wide swath here because this call is national, and every state has nuances and differences on what can be included in a energy savings performance contract project, and also how are the expenses accounted for? Is there savings from energy improvements? Are there savings from avoided capital going forward? Are there efficiency savings by simply doing reorganization of departments? So you've now got your project being constructed and then completed, and then you have commissioning. And commissioning is simply where you've got a lot of new systems in place, heating and cooling and what have you, air handling, quality, and fixtures. And it's actually putting those, not just constructing them, but putting them into service, meaning commissioning. There's oftentimes you will have ESCOs continue to work on site to optimize all of the systems that have put in place and train personnel on the use of those improvements, and that is called optimization. At that point, and you can kind of think of it as, if you had a punch list at that point, the punch list is complete because the energy performance contracting company has constructed all the improvements and done it for a set price. And now comes the proof of concept called measurement and verification. And this is whereby each year the ESCO comes back in and measures what the savings are. And if the savings are not what was guaranteed by the ESCO, then the ESCO writes a check to make up for that shortfall. And I can tell you from experience, they also are very quick to be back in to the facility to figure out where they missed the mark, or have set points been changed on HVAC, for example, or has in the case of hospital, are they using resources differently than they had said they would in the original scoping document?
Charlie, I'm gonna jump in a little bit. I'm sorry, because we're starting to run out of time, and I want to leave some time for Q&As, but I appreciate your
Sure.
input. Thank you. So I know a lot of folks on the webinar today. Weston, if you can change slide, please. Are here. There's a lot of excitement and opportunity around this new tax bill that was proposed. I'm going to focus my conversation mainly on that since we're running out of time, but feel free to put any Q&A in. So there's a couple tax credits and incentives that kind of tie all of these benefits together, whether you're doing renewable or geothermal, and then the core energy improvements. So things like Section 48, Section 48E, which are often referred to as the investment tax credit. Those are some sizable opportunities as far as being able to provide cash flow and helping paybacks meet their requirements. The Section 179D is another tool that many ESCOs use, and the schools and the governments should be very supportive of them using that and allocating those deductions to them, because those ESCOs are using those funds to basically help guide projects and help create the energy savings. So they're factoring it into their pricing when they're doing that work. So supporting them there on the 179D, well, that revolves savings for lighting, HVAC, and building envelope are important as well. So I know there's a lot of folks who have been, call it on the sideline when it comes to moving forward on renewable projects and solar projects, and maybe geothermal. So there was a good runway this week on Monday. The big beautiful bill, came out, and again, this is not final. This still needs to go to Congress. If you don't like what you see or don't like what you hear, we still recommend that you reach out to your congressmen or women and discuss and bring up the issues that you may see. But some of the key highlights and some of the important things to think about when we look at renewables, Section 48E, that has a pretty good runway. It doesn't appear that they are looking to affect or negatively affect or impact that program at least through 2029. So the phase out begins in 2029. So that gives us a nice runway on solar, battery storage, and whatnot to kind of get those projects underway, placed in service, and creates a pretty good opportunity there. And then there's going to be a 20% phase out through 2032. So it's 20% per year. So it'll go down 20 and then it'll phase out another 40%. But these are still very, very sizable tax credits in the neighborhood of 30 to 60%, depending on a bunch of different factors there when it comes to renewables. Additionally, there is Section 48, which looks at geothermal and thermal heat ground source heat pumps. That one has a little bit longer of a runway because it's based on beginning of construction. So anything that begins construction prior to 2030, and then it has an eligible phase down starting at that point. So as far as some of the things that are important to the stakeholders on this call, one of the positive things we saw is that elective pay and direct pay doesn't seem to be affected within the the terms of the bill. So for the time being, it seems like we are in the clear there, and you still have the ability to get that direct payment from the IRS back to the nonprofits and government agencies for that work. They are changing the transferability. So for any private sector folks on this call who are looking to potentially transfer these credits or sell them, the transferability is going to basically phase out for both solar and geothermal within 2 years from the date the bill is enacted upon. So those are some key things to kind of think about there. And then with that being said, we got short amount of time. We'll kind of jump into Q&A. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to jump in and bring them into the fold. And we'll share all these presentations later where you can dig a little deeper into some of the details around Section 48, Section 48E.
Yeah, so I'll kind of touch on, I know we're short on time, sorry guys here, but I do want to address kind of the two questions that came in. The first one is, really, is Energy Star still functional now? And what would ever replace Energy Star program if discontinued? Which we didn't touch too much on that in this, but it is, relevant to the space we're in. So I don't know who wants to take that, but
Yeah, I don't know. Tim, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, right now, we've heard the Energy Star program may be going away. We don't know. Perhaps it's going to be transferred over to Department of Energy. Perhaps it's going to completely disappear. We just don't have answers to that. So unfortunately, we really can't give you much guidance in that today.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a crystal ball situation. It's hard to know what they're going to do and what the plan is from that point of view. So as of the moment, yeah, I mean, programs still exist, but we'll see what happens.
okay. Let's jump to just along those lines. This question just came in. What about 179D effects? I'll let you guys just because we're talking about 45L, someone wants to lightly touch on that.
Yeah, I'll jump on 179D. So as part of the big beautiful bill, 179D does not appear to be affected. There was no changes proposed within it. There's no changes regarding the 5 times multiplier, the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. All that still remains, call it the same. And that could change tomorrow, right? They were doing markups a couple days ago. Who knows what the final bill will look like and what actually gets signed into law. But for the time being, 179D appears to be, business as usual.
Okay. Okay. And then one of the last questions here, a little more relevant to kind of some of the discussion here was, how can energy provider guarantee savings if the actualization of those savings depends on the occupants / attendants of the buildings participating in the energy saving measures? What if they don't participate?
Yeah, I
What a
don't know.
great question.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to take that one.
Yeah, jump on it, Tim.
So the reality is that's up to the ability of the energy service company and the owner of the building to craft a program that correctly gauges their ability to have involvement of building participants. Normally, you would structure your program so that the building occupants are not participating in the energy savings component. That being said, obviously the maintenance staff and the operational staff would have some participation in that. And if they get hot or cold calls from their occupants, they're going to adjust a building management system to adjust for that. When you develop a project, you have the ability to set standards of comfort that you put in the contract that says, this is what we'll maintain. If for some reason the owner wants to take the building outside of those standards of comfort, the energy service company has the ability to adjust the savings. It means you may not get as much savings and you may use some of that savings to satisfy your occupants, but it does mean that there is an adjustment that can occur. Normally, though, most projects are developed in such a way that there's a range of adjustments that are acceptable, and you calculate the energy savings based on that range, and therefore you can satisfy most of your building occupants. And so then the participants, the people in the building don't have to participate in the project actively. But that's a great question. That's a really good question, to be honest.
Yeah. Great. I do want to thank all the participants in today's webinar, Tim, Anissa, Charlie, Brian, Weston. Thank you guys for all your help in putting this together. I think this was an extremely informative session, and we'll be sending out the presentation as well as the recording for everybody's use after the webinar. So have a great rest of your day and rest of your week, and stay in tune on any legislative changes. We'll be posting on our LinkedIn and on our newsletter and whatnot. So we'll be keeping you informed of any changes coming up. So thank you.
Yep.
Thanks all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
David.
Have a good one.
Thank you.